Hi, welcome to today's episode of Exhibit Extras, where we take you inside our exhibits and our exhibit making process. So today we're going to look at this wagon. So why are we looking at this wagon today? One of our current exhibits that is on display at the Chester Museum is on transportation. And I wanted to start with this object because this was sort of the inspiration for the exhibit. So let's look at it. Now, this is a child's wagon. We don't have a lot of specifics on the date or a whole lot of information about the artifact itself, but part of the description of the artifact from the original donor is that it was a child's wagon that was used and pulled by goats. So there you go. Imagine a goat pulling this wagon, and it is in parts. So we've got this here, which would go actually underneath the wagon, especially if it was being pulled by goats or any other animal. This would be on the undercarriage of the wagon, under the bed, and would connect to, if there was a yoke used to harness it to the animal, maybe you could use it to hitch it to something for parking. But this would actually go underneath the wagon. So it's a wooden object, primarily with some metal connecting pieces, and it is in fairly decent condition. So we will set this over here. Now this thing is very fascinating. I really enjoy this object. So this is actually the underside here. So I'll prop it up a little bit so you can sort of see what we're working with. Alright, so this is it's missing some parts. There's no axle here, for example, for the wheels. It kind of looks like a sled, like it's a sled design. It's upside down right now, but you've got the brake system here. So when you apply the brakes, it would sort of move forward or move back and connect with the wheels and bring it to a stop. So some of this stuff is missing, some of the connecting, and then some of the pieces are missing. I'm going to flip it over here, and you can see what remains of the bed. Now, it does seem like there were some other things here, possibly a taller side and a back piece. This is really just the bottom part of the bed. Now, rotate it around here. This is the brake. So if you're sitting here, you could actually put the brake and you can sort of see how it works and functions there. But considering the fact that this is a child's wagon, probably from the turn of the century, so around the early 1900s, it's in pretty good shape. I don't know if you have children, or if you remember the toys that you had when you were children. It's lucky that it's in this good condition, especially if it was being pulled by goats. Who knows how rough this wagon's life was when it was being used. Now, there's not any real discernible information on here on the thing itself, other than the basic wood and metal composition. However, if you look closely, it's kind of hard to make out, and it's very faded, even if you're looking at this right directly. The description in our database says that it's a sunburst design, and you can kind of see little pieces here. So there's some sort of design here, so it looks like it was manufactured. Not a homemade wagon, this is some sort of manufactured or purchased item. Now, if you look online to try to identify this, there are some, really basic wooden vintage antique wagons that you can find. Some Studebaker Junior wagons from the early 1900s. I don't really think that it was one of those. unless a lot of the components are missing. Those tended to be a little bit sturdier. The slats for the bed were a little bit more tightly compacted. But you can find some images online that show similar designs and similar functions for how this wagon could have been used. Now, is this item on display as part of the exhibit? Ironically enough, it is not. So this was the inspiration for the exhibit. Try as we might, we could not get it on display. So the biggest reason for that is space. So when we're putting the exhibit together, there are a lot of factors that go into it. Interesting visuals. Do we have artifacts? Do we have photographs? So how are we piecing all these different things together? But one of the biggest things to think about is space. And so if we have an object, that's great, but if we don't have space for it, then it doesn't work. So as part of the exhibit right now, there are several large items. And the large items take up a lot of space, and so you kind of have to pick and choose. So even though this object is really, really interesting, and I love this item. It's a cool looking object that attracts attention immediately. Couldn't find a good way to display it. But we were able to display part of it. So to my left is part of the exhibit and part of the display. So one of the things that we do have as part of this object are the wheels for it. Now the wheels are not attached, there's nothing to attach the wheels to as we saw at the undercarriage, but we do have some of the wheels and we were able to put the wheels on display. So we have two wheels, and I'm saying wheels, we obviously do not have the full wheel on display. The database, I think, describes them as wheels, but what we have here are the hub of the wheel. And so you've got the point in which the axle would connect to the wheel. They provide the motion, and then basically the hole where these spokes for the wheel would have gone. So the wheel would have been much larger. Now it's possible that it could have been a small wheel. Some of these turn of the century wagon designs had sort of two small wheels and two large wheels. Some of them had uniform sets of wheels. We honestly don't know for this particular model, but we do have the wheel hub, so roughly we know approximate size of what these wheels could have looked like and how they would have been assembled. Now, we do have some of the photographs, we do have some photographs of other wagons that were used by children in the area in the late 1800s and early 1900s out as part of the exhibit. So we have examples of children in wagons, one and individual and groups of children in wagons, most of which date from the late 1800s, early 1900s. They give you a good snapshot as to visualize how this wagon could have been used when it was actually functioning as a wagon. Now, unfortunately, none of our photographs have goats pulling the wagon, but fortunately, you can find anything on the internet, such as pictures of goats pulling wagons, like the one that you see here. All right, so final verdict. Really cool item, really neat part of the transportation story that we were telling with our exhibit. And the inspiration for the exhibit itself does not make the cut. But we were able to use part of the artifact, since that is a fortunate part of having something that is not completely intact. You can use part of it. In this case, the wheel hubs fit perfectly in the display case, and so we were able to take wheel hubs and put them with pictures of wagons to show to make the connection. Here's what a wheel hub on a wagon looks like. Here's what a wagon in use looks like. Now, the sort of drawback is, if you're coming to look at the exhibit, you don't see this. This is not out on display. This is back in our archives. But we were able to make these connections and tell a story about transportation in Jonesboro, and in this case, how children might have transported in and around Jonesboro, both for fun and maybe for maybe on the farm, maybe around town, that sort of thing. Especially if you have goats or horses or something pulling your sort of junior wagons. But that is it for our first episode of Exhibit Extras, where we are going to continue looking at sort of more in-depth looks at items that are on display, or behind the scenes looks at how behind the scenes look at how exhibits come together, or items that didn't make the cut, and explain the sort of thought process into how that happened. Plus, it gives us a really good excuse to show some of our cooler items that we do like, and sort of show how they look and how they would have been used. So thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next time on the Chester Inn Museum's Exhibit Extras.